Greetings, ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of stories from across the internet. In this series, we'll be focusing on a web novel called There Is No Epic Lucha, Only Puns, from the website ReUpload. And in this video, we'll be doing chapters 76 to 78. I hope that you enjoy. There is no epic lucha, only puns, chapter 76, Jungle Fever. Kemi stared at the boss monster that sat next to her. Well, where his voice came from. His question was blunt, but not without purpose. Will we fight you? Kemi echoed. The taller goblin merely slipped in his drink as he waited for the answer. What kind of person was that? Kemi fidgeted with her empty glass and felt torn. If this was a normal dungeon, this wouldn't have even been a question. It would be a certainty. Bosses are guardians to the next level of death and a reward. You beat them and you know that you were strong, worthy of what came next. But here, in this place, everything Kemi had experienced had told her that the violence wasn't the answer. This dungeon of Deltas wanted to see something else, expected something else. Every monster that she'd met had allowed her to live. It was kind of clear that they had power to say otherwise. But this was new. Do you want to fight? Kemi finally answered. The boss monster's aura went charged for a moment. Yes, but not to the death if you can help it. I may return, but you lot are a bit more limited edition. Fran admitted. There was a clunk as Kemi guessed Fran put his glass down. I've been a boss for a while, and I've only had one good fight. The thrilling, the energy, the dancing of blades and wild spirits was beautiful. Fran's voice was soft, and the tone Kemi would normally hear of those in love. Fran was someone Kemi would never understand. She already knew that, but then that didn't mean that she couldn't empathize with him on some level. A boss with no boss encounters sounded lonely. We can try. I mean, no harm in trying if everyone knows that it's more like a spar than a death match. Kemi nodded. Fran actually burst out in laughter. No, I want you to go all out and try and kill me. I get better from that, he said amused. Sounds like you're handicapping yourself then. Kemi shook her head. She resolved the curious sniffling of the large wet nose of the pig sitting nearby. She giggled and petted it. I guess, but until some real warriors turn up, the ones that I feel the same as me, friendly spars aren't so bad, Fran admitted mostly to himself. Or if we use magic and arrows as well, is that okay? Kemi suddenly said, worried that Fran might expect swords and shields. Farah, the bartender, snorted. Franny, she's worried about you. Stop stealing the poor girl's heart. The goblin laughed. Fran's reply was hissed too low to be heard before he cleared his throat. It's fine. I want your best so that I can see if you're really ready for the next floor. You know anything about it? The boss asked lightly. Kemi sat up straight. Nothing. Anything you could share with me will be helpful. Kemi said eagerly. Fran's smile couldn't almost be felt against Kemi's skin. It's green, he said before draining his drink and burping so loudly that the bar shook. Kemi winced, and next thing she knew, he had downed another drink, and another, and another. Soon Kemi felt very, very happy and rather springy. Delta watched as the goblins carefully guided a rather drunk Kemi back to the entrance of the dungeon. She would have to make sure that Farah warned people that her shroom pops had a slight buzz to them. She let the tug from Nu on the second floor as soon as she zoomed down the stairs. She went silent thanks to Kemi for her visit. Soon the tunnels exploded into lush jungle life. Delta loved her jungle. To have seen such a vibrant green grow from nothing. Delta's efforts, her imagination, her wonder was a reality before her. Really, she would never grow bored of this. If there was no going home, wherever that was, and no getting out of this dungeon, then Delta honestly didn't mind making new floors. It was such a deep-seated satisfaction to see her results. But it also gave a rise to a new feeling. Creativity. Delta wanted to do more soon. The floor would be hers and she was going to make it amazing. But first, she was going to make her second floor even better. The jungle was here, and the monsters were here, and secrets were here, and the purpose was here. But it needed those extra touches to make it spectacular. Quite. I suspect we have some things to get done first. I opened up a few rooms to ease your mana burden so that they would need a purpose. Delta spread herself and felt the new spaces more clearly. Thanks for that, by the way. She smiled, eyes closed. She cracked one open to read New's reply. No good to me on the floor in pain. It was just logical. New speak for you're welcome. Delta chuckled as she floated gently over the treetops, observing the world below. Before I rush in to make more things, let me take it step by step, she asked as her travels ended up as she came to near the bridge that she had the frog monster giant guard. His massive frame and still posture only shifted as Delta called out in greeting. He nodded slowly, but said nothing. Delta didn't mind. She could almost feel the shy affection leaking off the giant's body. She smiled at him. Doing a good job. Get your key. Delta asked, and Giant opened one hand to show the brass key. It looked like a toy in his palm. Delta gave him a long look. You need to put it somewhere for when you are challenged. Any ideas? She asked gently. Giant nodded and walked to the middle of the bridge. The creation was one of Delta's grander projects, and she saw Giant had been slowly sliding branches in some of the nooks and holes to give it more bird nest vibe. The Giant easily reached over and slipped the key into the longest branch that stuck out. Midway in view, but not easy. I like it, Delta said before she peered over the gentle river flowing below and looked safe to fall in. Kinda ruined by the scenery. Let me fix that, she promised and closed her eyes. First off, her mana dipped and the river below sunk until it was double in height. A little more worth the risk now. Next up, she opened the bridge menu and browsed the options. The Jungle Bridge, a bridge to access the bare necessities of the jungle. Have the bridge move locations over time, 25 dp. Cause those to fall off the bridge to spat back out in the entrance side of the bridge, 15 dp. Cause the thick mist to cover the river below, increasing the atmosphere, 5 dp. Cause various bridge boards to be weak and crack under step. Random every time the level resets, 15 dp. Make the bridge grow natural branches to enhance the look of a nest, 5 dp. Allow key branch to be cold and trap the key until the giant is defeated, 10 dp. Delta grinned. With careful picking, she picked the mist, reversed falling gimmick, and the key branch. The results were rather sudden and cool. A weird ripple of orange energy flickered over the air below the bridge before it faded. Delta could barely see this weird web of energy that would catch those that fell. Next up, the thick mist rolled in from both sides of the river, and when it had settled, Delta could hear the river, but the mist was so awesome cinematic kind, the kind where it curled and danced on the spot. She swore that she could see ghostly shapes forming, fingers beckoning the onlookers. She couldn't see the river, and that made any who saw it wonder what was below. Joke was on them. There would be Rail and Bob, harmless softies. The last effect showed the branch holding the key growing with orange veins as it grew farther out from the bridge. The tip curled slickly and trapped the key in its grip. Delta floated over and saw the wood looked stronger. It would take some more fancy arrows or luck sword throw to chop this wood. She turned back to Giant, whose left arm glowed with the same orange veins for a moment. The connection clear. Giant flexed his arm with intent, and the branch swayed at his command. Oh, that's neat. Now you can reward people as they pass your test. Delta clapped her hands with excitement. Giant's averted eyes, when slightly bluish cheeks showed Giant was pleased about this. My home is exciting, he echoed. Delta nodded and the Giant looked even more pleased. Delta loved the big lug. She waved goodbye and floated over the jungle again. Next on the list was, should Delta go by distance or alphabetical? Meh, distance it was. It was less hassle to think. Delta landed in one of the happiest places in a dungeon, Ferris bar aside, the domain of the bees. She touched down. Queen Lizzie's face appeared near the highest footer of the hive and greeted her warmly in the humming buzz of hers. Hey, how goes being a mother to, a lot of kids? Delta asked politely as new box tinged with a sigh. Lizzie buzzed, and her affection and her 5 minutes solid, her listings of her children's name. Bzzzt, 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 Garnash, bzzzt, tzzzt. John, bzzzt, bzzzt, and some of Delta's favorites. Delta saw that the very apex of the pillar was another brass key, covered in dry honey, covering it in a shell of a honey amber. Several of the mutant large bees floated around it. They were rather adorably fat once Delta got past the stingers larger than her head, and the buzzing noise like a wood chipper making love to a helicopter, and the angry red color. But really, the chubbiness made them kinda cute after a while. Delta focused back on the queen. I was making sure that the space was ready for any adventurers. I can see the key up there, but how are the people supposed to get it? Delta tried, but paused politely as the red rock loomed over them. Lizzie buzzed. No, people don't have wings, Delta promised. Lizzie buzzed again. Most do not have more than 2 arms to climb with, she explained. Silence stretched for a moment, then Lizzie buzzed for a long moment. Delta pursed her lips. I guess compared to a bee, a person is rather boring biologically, but they can do a lot of neat stuff, I promise. Delta assured the queen before she looked at the pillar and made a bunch of handholds and crevices for people to climb on to reach the top. The leaking honey didn't get too far, and most of it was used to build more pillars and even works of art by the bees. Delta dipped into the ground lower, and the pool of honey deepened as the moat of golden honey formed around the royal pillar. The last touch was several stepping stones at the base of the pillar. Not only did it look rather awesome, it gave anyone who fell from the top of the pillar a chance to not get splat on the solid ground. Not too deep, as they could drown as well. Honey could be heavy. Lizzie buzzed politely and said that the moat of honey looked nice, at least. Queen needs a proper moat, or she just doesn't have a cool factor. Delta explained this seemed to give something for the bee to think about. And Delta bid her farewell. Next up would be Gramps. She skipped Luna for now, ideas still forming there. Gramps was an odd monster. He rarely left the spawn room, tending to it and making sure that it looked at peak condition. Not that dirt or dust were a thing in the dungeon, but Delta appreciated it nonetheless. Hi, Delta. Gramps greeted, sensing her before she even spoke. The old hunched frog didn't hobble, but Delta wanted to look at him all the same. Hey, Gramps, how's it going? She asked. The frog smiled in a relaxed smile. The room is calming, and I find the water soothing compared to the chaos out there, he stated without any hint of shame. Delta giggled, looking at the stone altar resting in the middle of the shimmering green water. The frog spawn room had a calming quality if one liked wet places. I came to grant you an upgrade. I was thinking that I have quite a few frog monsters, and if something was to go wrong, it would be good to have an overreaching authority, like a chief, she explained as she walked across the water calmly. Gramps rubbed his chin. You want this old hermit to look after all of them? Did I do something wrong? He asked, clearly jesting, but Delta merely shrugged. You don't have to accept it if you want to stay, Gramps, she promised. Something she would never do unless dire circumstances demanded it was to force such a change on her monsters. Gramps waved her words away with a webbed hand. It would be an honor, and I can see the need for someone to keep Rail and Giant from causing a mess. He rolled his eyes as he walked forward with both hands behind his back. Delta could only imagine the falling trees if both of them wrestled. Then Bob would get involved. She shivered and was glad Gramps was open to the idea. Just give me a minute, this won't take too long, she promised as she came to a stop on the water, closest to the statues of Rail and Davina. She opened the menu of Gramps, seeing the generic options. She highlighted the Chieftain evolution and watched Gramps become covered in strings of light that formed a cocoon around him. The light grew brighter, and from the sphere several lines of gold flew out of the cave like strings. The whole scene died down to reveal a frog that was no longer quite as hunched. Gramps had gone from old and gnarled to old and kind of impressive. The first thing she really noticed was the headdress made of several of her local birds woven together to almost form a cloak and a hood. He flexed, and several popping noises and cracks showed that he had not only grown upwards, but also in size. His wrinkly frame now had sleeping, powerful muscles under the yellowish skin. All down his chest and torso, black marks that looked almost like burned into the skin were visible. It showed a winding painting of 3 frogs holding up and flipping it for... Wait, no, that was Delta's symbol. Delta almost sighed with relief. She had far too many pots and monsters to have a silent green boy appear. Delta's symbol was painted orange, and it was the centerpiece of the tattoo. It pulsed once, and Grams took a step forward, his kilt made of the fox pelts and something dark. In one hand he held a staff with a solid head carved into the generic frog's head. Overall, the effect was pretty good on Gramps. She took a quick peek at his menu as he seemed to take a moment to gather himself. Gramps, Chieftain Frog, a single frog that holds power over the general frog monsters. He can call and lead them all in battle with great results. He holds some mystical powers due to frog magic, also known to be cranky. He also has known to whack youngsters over the head for being rude. It was everything Delta ever wanted. Gramps tapped the staff once, and the water of the frog spawn room shivered as if afraid. The grim face showed a soft smile as he stared at her. My Delta, he breathed before frowning. He spun the staff and it pulsed in the air. In the distance there came a masculine shriek. Rail, do not surf Sereni down the river, you thick-headed rock of frog. He snarled and he shook his head. I enjoyed being a hermit, but now I gotta feel all these rascals pulling each other's legs or doing something stupid. But I can still stay here and tend to the room. I find it peaceful, and I'll need a peace before long. Gramps snorted as he tilted his head. Divina dear, that would be lovely. I shall boil some water if you fetch the honey, he promised to Divina. Delta blinked and found the female frog quite a distance away. You're connected to them all? She asked with interest as she walked in time with him to the entrance of the room that was high up. More like I am aware of them. I'll learn to mute them eventually. Ram smiled and returned before he nodded to the jungle. Do not fret. You have much work to do, and it won't be long before more people come. You need to secure yourself and grow, he encouraged warmly. Delta blinked before she smiled. She threw her arms around him, only feeling a bare fleeting sensation before she pulled back. Hugging while being a ghost was hard, but she did what she could. Try and leave. The fake light is good for you, she promised, and took off with a jump, gliding across the sky. She twisted and flipped slowly, lying to think that she could just fly when it suited her. Delta laughed as she fell on purpose. Her feet went through the trees and rocks until she slowed down to land on the surface of the hot spring. She looked down to see the surface barely rippling as she moved by. It was just so magical. Delta shook her head and her thoughts. What about this place wasn't magical? Even the mushrooms could shoot laser beams now. Hey-yo, Mum, Luna called as she petted over to the edge of the hot springs with a wave cheerfully at her. Luna! Delta quickly hurried over and gave her younger-sounding frog a once-over. Still looking graceful in her kimono, Luna was a picture of perfect image of style. Even the black boot heels seemed just to add to her character. Now Delta was going to give us something else to have. How would you feel about being a ninja? She asked with excitement. Luna blinked once or twice. Do I still get to be in charge of the springs? Was the first question. Delta shrugged. It's an evolution, not a job, so I think you can do both, she reasoned out. Luna leaned forward, her hands on her hips and her mouth stretched into a smile. Do ninjas kill people in cool ways? She asked almost innocently. Delta gave her a long look. Normal ninjas do cool, flashy attacks and appear from the shadows like you're already dead. They use laser swords and giant monsters to fight for them, Delta said with a bright smile. Luna's eyes were so wide that they almost fell out of her head. I want to be one, she demanded. But I don't think you... Delta tried to explain that the evolution was most likely to be a more historically accurate, but less version, but Luna was already swinging some invisible blade and making whooshing noises. Delta merely shrugged and purchased the frog assassin evolution for her. Unlike Gramps, the cocoon that surrounded her was made of pulsing dark and orange fibers. They fell away like shadows under the sun, and a figure that was Luna stood there for a moment. The only thought Delta had proper was, at least there were no laser swords. black baggy top showed Luna's torso was tightly wrapped with bandages. Her shorts were much the same, but no one should be wearing that many belts and fishnets. Legs, arms, neck, most of her body showed Luna had fishnets over her skin. Also, why did she have 3 belts on each arm? You only need 1 belt, and none of these ones that she wore were in the correct place. Instead, a deep purple sash seemed to tie her black outfit together. I am the night. I am the silence. I'm so cool. Luna gushed over her new outfit. She's the worst assassin I have ever seen, and I've never seen another one in my existence. How did you screw this one up? News annoyed words only made Delta stare longer. I may have put ideas into her head about ninjas. They may be entirely the wrong ideas, Delta admitted. Luna twirled, and a deep thunk echoed out through the springs as Luna threw a handful of hidden needles that buried themselves into the wood with ease. Spine, heart, lungs, liver, brain. So many targets, so exposed. Luna said as she spun lightly, and to Delta's surprise, the ninja grab was replaced by her hot spring guardian outfit. She changed and was almost instant. Oh good, I still have my heels. Luna said cheerfully. A few twirls showed that she wasn't just changing outfits. She was leaning her new being towards her job and her evolution, switching between them like a press of a button. Delta guessed that it would take time for her to balance both. Until then, no one would suspect the graceful Luna to actually be an assassin. Or maybe they would. It's hard to say. The only thing left to do now, while Luna was doing her best Wonder Woman impression, was to upgrade the hot springs themselves. Now, Delta began to smile very slowly at the innocent bubbling water. She had a rather fun idea. After all, Luna still needed a good test, right? Yo, no. Why is Mum cackling? She heard Luna whisper. Because she thinks she's clever, and whatever she's planning is going to backfire so badly it'll hurt me in my soul. Whoa, she can hurt people's souls. That's so cool. Luna's awe was clear, and Delta's laugh trailed off as she had an inkling Lou was right. Still, it had never stopped her before. She just needed to gather some items, upgrade a few flowers, and invest in some incense burner. Delta put the next upgrade on the agenda list, right after she popped into Rennie's circus and finally helped the mime get a decent home. Jeez, so much work. Delta turned and beamed. She couldn't lie. She loved it. And the truth, Truff, is that I love you, in a nice way, not like a married way. Kemi explained at the stoic bartender back in Durance. She felt her bestest sister in the whole world, Ania, sigh. Kemi, how did you come back drunk? She asked again. Kemi pushed a finger to Ania's lips. Shh, I'm not drunk, it's Pop, she argued. She would never get drunk on a holy pilgrimage. Never, intentionally. Girls redder than quizzes behind after I was done with him, the loud, wonderful woman known as Rudy said. Kemi gasped as she stumbled over to her. You punished Quest. Quish. Was he bad? Kemi said dramatically and looked at the scowling blonde man. She did a prayer for his immoral soul. Oh, he was very bad. Rudy slammed her mug down, laughing at Quish. I shall redeem you, Kemi announced, and she stood on the table. By the power of truth, I say, with the best town in the world, she cried, beaming so brightly she hiccuped once more and toppled back into Gonga's waiting arms. Okay, Delta got her pissed. I need to know how, was all that she heard before she was warm embraced by the love and truth of Amia's grumpy mumbles. She would have to remember the gift of the gobbers, something nice for bringing her home. Some love, yes, that would be nice. Everyone needed Kemi love. Delta, especially. Kemi would give her all the love, and more. Pop. The girl giggled in her sleep. End of chapter. There is no epic lucha, only puns. Chapter 77. Flower Power. Delta rubbed her hands. The circus and several free rooms called to her as a slight perfectionist at a dungeon core, but she held off until she could give the hot springs a decent purpose to offer a key. The idea came to her when she remembered stories of spirit journeys. Her history of the act was wonky, but she knew that such a thing originated in many cultures. The idea was simple. Get people really high and see if they can learn something about themselves or achieve some goal. Most people are generally unable to look outside of their own box of thinking, and having various herbs and roots burning and soaking into you really helped to do that. The only issue was that Luna was no way to really achieve such a thing. Hence, it was up to Delta to grow some psychedelics in her jungle. Harmless and goofy kinds. The mushrooms might already be well on their way to tripping people physically, so why not do it spiritually? Well, she would see the pretty flowers could do first before allowing more mushroom chaos in her dungeon. She pulled up her overall purchase menu and browsed what flowers she had available. Most of it was very generic plants that grew above ground. The menu didn't list them as having any strong properties like the ones she wanted. She had some mushrooms that could do it, but Delta wanted to see how creative she could get. By creating a mushroom grove, she opened up various mushroom mutations. So following that logic, the same understanding from Assist, Delta should be able to grow a similar herb garden. She picked a secluded room not far from the hot springs, so Luna didn't have to walk far. It was a room that was exposed to a mana vent. She shifted the top level of soil and began to choose various flowers that Hob and Gob had collected. They had mentioned plenty of flowers had appeared recently. Maybe spring had come, or something. Tiffany, a droopy flower, 2 mana. Bell ringer, petal shaped like a bell, 3 mana. Spotted dog, a flower with a lolling stem, 2 mana. Goblin spit, a flower with an aroma of zombie feet, 3 mana. Ash lady, a grey flower that seems sad to look at, 2 mana. Pollen polly, a budding flower that hiccups out pollen, 3 mana. Creeping fire, a flower that spreads itself to the most of sunlight, grows red flowers, 3 mana. All very interesting things in their own right, but as the menu told her with the cost, they were all really boring and plain flowers. Anything with proper medicinal use or magical vibes would cost a lot more. No idea, however, wasn't just to buy the flowers that Delta wanted, but to make them. Just like the mushrooms and various animals around, she just needed a base. She purchased a few of each and dropped about 20 mana on the whole idea, arranging the flowers in a haphazard circle of color and growth. It was actually a pretty nice little garden when the last flower snugly settled down. It's not a bad idea, but the mushroom came fast due to the potency of the mushroom that you were intaking and various mushroom monsters. This might take a bit longer. New advised, and Delta tapped a 10. Could be, but I'm more experienced in this since the first floor. I think I just need to take the time to push my ideas on. Maybe add a few things to give the flowers something to mutate with. It's all guesswork, but that's what makes it kind of fun. Delta shot the text box a large grin. She swiped one hand at the menu, and the second form of the name looked perfect. Hidden jungle garden. In the midst of chaos, beauty can be found. Mana vents unlock auto-spawn. Newly collected flowers will sprout once in the garden, free of charge. Other effects unknown. Allow plants flowers to regrow over time when picked. Rarer flowers take longer, 10 DP. Allow crossbreeding of flowers to create unique strains. Cannot be done with magical or complicated plant life forms, 20 DP. Allow Druid's Blessing from the adventurer Dabergast to enable the creation of magical flowers with various costs, 0 DP. Druid's Blessing is used up. Delta ran her finger over the name of Mrs. Dabergast, her stomach filled with the warmth of affection and appreciation for all that the woman had done in her short time in her dungeon. She hoped Mrs. Dabergast would approve of how her gift was being spent. Delta purchased the blessing and the first, and watched. Then the formation of the blue and the garden became less of an idea and more of a fact. The room changed to reflect its new status, empowered by the blessing. The room, whose entrance was almost hidden by thick trees and high grass, began to glow in a deep-seated green. The ground shook as if flattened, and a huge circle of rocks pushed up out of the ground to form loose walls of a garden. From the center of the garden a rock was quietly shaping itself into the rough form of a kindly figure holding a staff. The rock was quickly covered in blossoms and to form an unseen flower that gave the area a feeling of serenity and wildness. The plants all seemed to swoon and dance gently, in some unfelt wind, towards the statue. Delta was feeling giddy again. Next, she purchased the ability for the plants to breed and regrow, causing the green pulsing energy to grow stronger. All of the flowers seemed to soak this energy up, and the statue became a little more detailed. The staff held by the statue of a woman seemed to be leaking mana from the vent it was placed over. Already, the tiny seedlings were forming between the Ash Lady and the Goblin Spit. Dalton named the hybrid Lady Goblin. Any other combo was just mean. With the formation of the garden, some new options had been unlocked in the menu. Hidden Jungle Garden. In the midst of chaos, beauty can be found. Purchase more magical flower slots. Create magical flower Sandman's Kiss. A yellow flower. Its petals feel rough like sand. Prolonged inhaling of its aroma can knock someone out. Unlocked with Sandalf Powder, 5 DP. Create magical flower of honeysucker, a bright orange flower with a stinger hidden inside like a bulb. It can drain fluids from adventurers. Unlocked with bee influence, 5 DP. Create magical flower ember, a small demure plant with crimson petals. It is a warm to the touch, and eating it may cause an intense stomach issue, 5 DP. Delta was happy to see the garden was going the way she wanted. The honeysucker was a no-go for now, unless it would do other things. Another box opened, and a small piece of information. Only 3 magical flowers can be purchased at any time. Buy more to unlock more upgrades, the garden to have more options. This will cost mana. Correction, mana vent used in construction. Garden will drain 3 mana from it a day, and purchase upgrades automatically. Mana points will stockpile until purchases can be purchased. Please check back to see if your new amazing dungeon flowers and upgrades periodically. 3. Natural mana from the vent will be converted into 1 DP. Delta's smile went rigid. No, why is my garden now set to auto? She asked, voice cracking slightly. The news box was quiet for a moment. You stuck a druid's blessing on top of a mana vent and sent it to dungeon space. I fully expected something would explode, or worse. Right, that. It wasn't a bad trade-off. It wasn't like Delta couldn't still purchase things on her own whim. But still, if she didn't check back often, then what kind of things would grow here? Delta watched as more tiny seedlings popped out of the ground. How could such tiny-looking things be in any trouble? Delta smiled again, and was kind of pleased once she thought about the whole thing. The room was almost self-sufficient in terms of growth. It would do its own thing once Delta got what she came for. If the medicinal herbs and plants appeared, then it would really be its own little paradise for people to stumble upon it. A Delta treasure. A little to give to those who made it this far. She wondered if people would understand that while she was challenging them, she didn't want them to think that she disliked people. Delta purchased the Sandman's Kiss flower and watched as the flower unfurled out of the crowd amongst the Goblin Spits, Ash Ladies, Bell Ringers, and others. The things looked like it was made from sand when it moved in time with the dance of the garden. Soft yellow dust floated off of it. Soon more of them would grow, and Delta's idea for Lunar Spring would be more viable. Still, it would be good to let it grow and spread before she had Luna pluck them. With any luck, the system would set up some trade route between the two spots without having to have Delta monitor it too much. She was about to head over to the circus until a bush rustled and a tiny mushroom wearing a tiny mask appeared. Delta's thoughts had been busy on improving anything else, vanished as she bent down to coo at the tiny thing. Cute little mushy thing, yes you are. Delta said. The thing listened, hearing her, but maybe it didn't see her because it chirped and danced. Delta's lungs nearly exploded from the containing her squealing. It waddled off and waited, looking back. It seemed to be waiting for her. You want me to come with you? She asked. The pygmy mushroom chirped and danced again. Delta began to crawl along the ground after it. I have the best dungeon ever, she beamed. Nu watched as Delta be fooled by the little demons of the jungle again, and merely ignored the spectacle. This garden that Delta made by accident, like most things in her dungeon, was worthy of attention. It was a machine of its own devices now. Interesting. the plants would grow, mutate, and spread. Magical flowers would be created via inspirations, and what was interesting was that, like the seedlings appearing all over the room, there was seedlings intelligence managing it. New mostly got the impression that it was even less than the menu like himself. It was more like an impression of intent. The room itself had a purpose, and Sis wasn't exactly controlling it directly. She must have used the vent and the blessing to create a simple servant to run the process for her. A large greyish flower appeared shortly after Delta had left the room. The flower that she had created for the large variant of the... New paused. The dungeon was vibrating. No, the air was shaking. New turned his box and stared at the solid wall of red bees flooding into the garden. New gave out an alarmed bell noises as he drowned in the tidal wave of bees as they eagerly assaulted the new haven of pollen and resources. The statue of the kindly woman in the center of the room looked over the scene, and one could almost swear that his rough eyes were twinkling. Delta, unaware of the nightmare behind her, was following her little friend. It danced and chirped for her, and most of them appeared in a cute little dance. She giggled as they tripped and became dizzy as they danced a little too hard. They seemed to be leading her back to the pygmy cave, where the village was. Delta didn't mind. New mentioned that he had done something there, so maybe it was a good thing to check it out before the circus. She landed softly at the center of the village, and all the pygmies began to do little cute dances. Delta loved these innocent little creatures. Maybe she should trap the entrance in case some person tried to take them away, locked in cages, wanting to come home to the dungeon and Mama Delta. She calmed herself. Deep breath in and out. Her monsters couldn't leave the dungeon. They were safe. They squeaked and led her towards the new tunnels that New must have opened to help her drain excess mana. Peering through, the two rooms showed nothing but the key that she had entrusted to the creatures. This nagged at her. All of this empty space, all of this potential is not getting used. On top of it all, she turned to see the collected pygmy forces staring up at where her voice was coming from, and as she hummed. Besides the chief, the little guys had no real warriors or standout heroes. If someone did invade, they would be wiped out before long. Delta was not going to let that happen. She pulled up the menu, and thankfully it compiled the options for all of the pygmies into a single box, instead of Delta having to go through them each individually. Pygmy mushrooms, these demons are angels to the core. Delta snorted. Sis was having fun with these titles now. Demon? Maybe. Maybe if someone annoyed the little ones, she could see them getting all puffy and riled up, and the image was so cute. Allow the pygmy village to expand to the second tunnel room, 15 DP. Change one team of pygmy mushrooms into official tunnelers for the village, granting them limited earth shaping to make safer tunnels, allowing more to escape tunnels to appear all over the second floor. Escape tunnels for the pygmies, not their victims, 15 DP. Change the pygmy mushroom into one of the following classes, only one of each may exist at a time, 10 DP. Priest of Mycelia. The one who tends the flock can bless and heal the feral warriors as well as the fungoid life. Fungomancer, a being who holds sway over the secrets of spores and inert fungi, and can command them to do its bidding. Stinker Tinker, a clever fellow who uses intellect and craftsmanship to crush foes rather than raw strength. Delta pursed her lips and tried to be reasonable adults, but the entire village had begun to dance as if they felt the change coming. Delta's heart pounded, and her raw power of the ocean as they began to dance with each other and chirped songs. Delta bought all three of these hero classes, almost smashing the box with her eagerness, and held her breath. 3 of the pygmies near the front glowed with an aura of orange. Their change took a little while, so Delta also purchased the mining team upgrade for the little cute buggers. Those guys were finished faster. 3 of them appeared to be holding little shovels and had tiny little brown overalls on. Delta leaned in until her nose was almost touching them. They waved their new spades, and almost adorably too short for them, and chirped at each other. They still had their little painted masks and blowpipes at their sides, which was good. Their caps seemed to have been carved into turned darker yellow in color. The village all cheered and the change, but before they could dance once, the three heroes emerged, and the first was a dainty little mushroom covered in a mossy green robe, the small cap and the tiny little clumps of glowing moss and the shape of a circlet. It walked forward, and in one of its hands had a staff that it waved. The spray of sparkling spore spread over the pygmies as they all inhaled, singing a low song of gratitude. The priest bowed slightly before swishing its robe and dancing for Delta. It was, almost, too much for Delta to handle. The next form to emerge was likewise clad in a robe, but a dark material formed a hood that was pulled over its cap. The light, pointy hood and the glowing green eyes made it less cute and cooler, but it walked forward with the belt of a mushroom caps around its waist before it pulled out a wand and made a bone-white mushroom on it. It waved it, and various mushroom platforms and houses trembled. It bowed. Delta politely clapped. It turned and tripped over its robe in its hurry to fade from the light. It rubbed its cap, and the hood fell down to reveal the chubby pygmy mushroom. Delta silently adjusted the cuteness meter back to its proper place. The last appeared and looked up to the sky. Delta knew that she had a favorite. On its face was a set of goggles, as might have been on back in the old times. Several magnifying glasses enlarging the tiny beady eyes of the tinker to the large round ovals. Delta would die for this creature. It itched its cap and moved forward with a belt of rough stone tools and rope coiled around one arm. It looked at the space and chittered to itself, smacking its cap as it vanished into the village, brandishing a stone hammer in its hair like a declaration of battle. Delta beamed. So cute. Davina paused in her attempt to trap Dilbert inside of the new moat of honey. She felt disturbed, as if a great evil had only grown eviler. She turned slowly, but the jungle was quiet. She didn't trust it. "You gone sweeten me, honey," Dilbert taunted as he neatly slipped out of her grasp and preened himself. Davina was too focused on sensing. "They have grown. Dilbert, with me," she urged and took off running. There was no sarcasm or pun fired back. Dilbert must have finally sensed it as well. Pygmies. Delta stretched as she eyed the tunnels and rooms hidden behind the village. She needed to do something, but she wasn't sure exactly what. It was to be something that played with the pygmies' advantage, but not entirely unfair to the adventurers. She pondered as she watched the dungeon's senses as Wilhelm stomped by, ignoring the war cries of the pygmies. He only seemed to like her and Lord Mushy, maybe Missy the mushroom. Speaking of, Delta watched as Missy appeared, the child of the starlight mushrooms and the blood curdlers. The delicate form landed, and all the pygmies froze in their place, except for the three new heroes and the chief. Missy waved gently, and they all bowed to her. The three showed off their new forms, and Missy politely clapped, and her eyes glowed a little in the dark. A little reminder to Delta that Missy was capable of using laser beams to great effect. Missy walked over and waved to Delta. "Hello, how goes being in the dungeon?" Delta asked with a smile. Missy pondered this before her eyes lit up, twin lights making a smiling wave in the air, the lasers moving quick enough for the leaf-glowing trails. The hiss and the air also let Delta know that it was still hot as heck. Only in Delta's dungeon did a silent mushroom communicate via lasers of death. "Well, it's always good to bounce ideas off others, so maybe you can help me," Delta asked. The white, fluffy arms of Missy waved in excitement and response. "Good to hear. Now, my princess of mushrooms, I need to do something to challenge people." Delta began, Missy's eyes glowing red, dangerously, without killing them. Delta quickly added. Missy lost the glow and looked skyward as if thinking hard. "We can use the pygmies and such, but we only have 2 rooms, aside from the village, and the key needs to be in the back." She summed up. Missy looked at the room and Delta watched as her lasers turned back on, burning an idea into the wall as if Missy focused her eyes. Delta watched, and a smile forming on Missy's idea began to shape. In the darkness, the priest, the fungomancer, and the tinker all watched, plotting their own designs into the growing drawing. The tinker almost sang to joy at the image. It could do so much with this. Pitfalls, boulders, spikes, and blunt nature, and basic science. In the pygmy tunnel, a high-pitched mad cackle sounded out. End of chapter. There is no epic lucha, only puns. Chapter 78, Maze of Life. It began by pushing the room to the max size Delta could manage. With the DP dipping below 200, the room was much closer to a small hall. Delta floated and looked down at the space before her. It was the second large space on the second floor. She closed her eyes and spent some mana to summon walls. Lots of walls. The design choice grinded loudly until they hit the ceiling and cloaked all sight from one side of the room to the other. They were strong walls, thick enough to allow the pygmies to tunnel through, giving new digger teams something to work on, but with enough space that a person, and maybe a small person, could stand side by side. It cost her some DP to push the room to the size, and Delta was going to make the most of it. The stone walls began to take shape, and straight away Delta had a path split and split again. Only one true end could be seen from the above, and so many dead ends, but Delta was going to end it there. She added some moss to the walls to give the vibe of an old ruin hidden far away. Delta's own little labyrinth, hidden inside her jungle, which was kind of a natural labyrinth itself. She hoped people didn't cry when they saw the maze. Having the walls so thick meant that the pygmies could easily traverse through and under the maze to arrive at any certain spot due to the tunnels looked a little obvious. The moss and creeping vines only hid them so well. So Delta felt the menu of the room appear. Since she was lacking anything really special, the options for the upgrade were rather simple. Labyrinth of the Pygmies. May all who enter beware. Replace soil ground with stone, 5 DP. Have the walls carved with legends of the dungeon. This will make any traps or hidden functions easier to hide, 5 DP. Have walls shift or relocate to confuse wanderers, 10 DP. Have fountain of fresh water in one of the dead ends along with a tribute jar, 10 DP. Allow a fruit tree to be found in one dead ends with a tribute jar included, 10 DP. Create a mist that covers the floor, adds atmosphere, 5 DP. It was all nice to see Sis going above and beyond, trying to make Delta's ideas even better than she could have ever hoped. Delta purchased the ground replacement and the wall carvings and the shifting walls for now, until people actually started reaching the second floor and understanding the keys. There was little point in getting all of the upgrades for such an out-of-the-place room. The labyrinth floor rippled as the stone rose above the soil and completed the feeling of stumbling upon an artificial wonder. The steps of walking would sound louder too, so Delta could, if she was feeling mean, use the mists to have them stomped sound effect to scare adventurers. The walls bubbled furiously as some parts sunk in and others expanded, images and carvings of things that began to appear. Delta saw herself. A girl with a long flowing skirt and a tie in the wind, floating in the palm of a mushroom. Delta's face carved with show distrust. Aptly, the words below were in English, oddly enough. They read, "The Beginning." Below her feet was 3 goblins holding her up, one face blank and the other features, while the other 2 looked beastly and odd. The timeline of events showed Delta a shocking amount of events that had passed. Watching the blank-faced goblins become Fran, the knight, the making of the pond, the odd image of Delta pulling a glowing box out of the chest as it was speaking. The walls weaved on, as careful to follow the timeline of events. The end could be found, but the shifting walls muddled events, and Delta had to chase these fleeting next chapters in her journey so far. She had been so surprised to see herself grow from a lonely, sad girl to a woman surrounded by monsters and purpose. It was like a little prototype archive of an adventure so far. Delta patted the wall for doing a good job and making her not look too bad in 2D. The wall shifted and let her easily walk forward, despite her ability to phase through anything, but she appreciated the gesture nonetheless. Soon she was at the last room, until more people appeared. She didn't do more than give the key an altar. She moved the rock up and formed a mushroom shape. Delta stared. "Can you be more regal? That's an important key," she complained to the system. The mushroom altar paused before it grew a little crown to sit around the key with a plush pillow. That's not what I meant. Delta put her hands on her hips. She knew Sis was just amusing herself, but still, turning, she headed back to the village of the pygmies and looked around the space. She knew the little fellows would be getting some guests or invaders, so she tried to imagine what they would do to prove not as a threat but as help. She made a barrel with some torches and apples. The village could be somewhat of a resting spot before braving the labyrinth. This would show off the good interests and not the murder of the pygmies. The little folks looked at the barrels with confusion before Delta made a large sign, like a gate, that simply declared, "Pygmy Village, welcome travellers." The chief peered at the message before he turned and chirped to his people and heroes. Delta was still getting a hang of the language and mostly got "gift to us people prizes." She was glad to understand her intent. The priest leaned on her staff. The powerful chief's words were great truth indeed as they spread around the area. The great mother of us all has delivered the greatest trap of all. She will convince tributes to enter the village and be a gift to us. The people shall trust us, and we shall strike and take the treasures for Mother once they enter the dark tunnels. Prizes will soak the soil, such as the wit of the Great Mother. He roared, and the priest felt her faith grow stronger, and she almost knelt on her knees to pray there and then. "I want the fancy parts," Tinker shouted with a warning. "I want their flesh," Fungal hissed, and the priest wanted the people to thrive. All was in accordance with the Great Mother. Delta, the mother, left her words quiet but deep. To the circus. New slithered in past space next to the tiny folk and went still with fear. The moon to the mother's sunlight, the shadow cast by mother. It said nothing to them. It needed not to. It understood them, and the pygmies understood New. Serve Delta, or perish. New planted a large wooden board with words on it next to the entrance and the moving tunnels. Words quickly spread, and the warning carried it. "If you behave, the next part will only be a little bad. Step on the minions and your path will be hell." New. A small sect of shadow worshippers in the village took the name to heart. The Minion Clan is soon waiting for their first guest. The circus on the second floor was the oddest part of Delta's dungeon, and she did not make the claim lightly. It really was something she found more than created, but it was still now her space. Adopting Rennie had made it all the more important to properly do it up and think of it as a home, just like the rest of a dungeon. The large opening that allowed Wilhelm, the giant gorilla, to pass showed that the statue of Rennie's father that looked carefully awashed. She could see where various flowers, fruits, and even the odd pile of pebbles had been placed at the feet of the statue like an offering. Delta guessed it was the closest thing Rennie had to a grave for his father. There was the sound of rocks being kicked, making Delta jump and spin to see the innocent Rennie, hands in pockets, looking like he was just accidentally around when she scared Delta. Don't do that. Divina is bad enough," she chided, and with a swipe of her hand, Rennie neatly covered his painted face politely as his shoulders shook. Delta blew out a sigh. That damn mime enjoyed this way too much. "So after much deliberation, I've decided that you and your circus are worthy of my powers and upgrades," Delta said smoothly, trying to sound suave. Rennie shrugged and pointed at the door to say if Delta didn't have to. "But I like making things better," she backpedaled. Rennie waved the circus tent, his large, ghoulish mouth stretching in amusement, grumbling. Delta looked at the circus tent before entering. She hadn't been in here since finding Rennie. It felt invasive, but that was part of the whole vibe Delta had stuck in her head about the circus not being part of a dungeon. The musty, unlit space was just as she remembered. It still felt a little depressing, knowing this had been a gravesite more than a tent of wonders in the last moments. She felt Rennie stand beside her. His smile was smaller, a little sad. He gave her a once-over. He nodded. It was permission to influence the space, and it made Delta relax. She tried to take his hand, but the best she could do was occupy the same space. "I'll make sure it looks good. I'll make your dad proud that it's coming back," she promised. Rennie looked down at their hands before looking away. His cheeks were actually turning purple. Oh, delicious revenge was Delta's. Rennie walked forward and seemed to slightly clear his throat. He looked around before putting one of the beams that kept the whole thing up. Oh, I should be able to upgrade the whole thing in one go, but I'll keep you updated. Any requests? She grinned. Rennie tapped his chin before making some motions. Up and down, he caught something. Things to juggle, she guessed. Rennie nodded before he then held up both hands to pretend to walk across a thin ledge or wire. Oh, a pole. She clapped. Delta had never been to a circus before. Never been. Why had she? She didn't quite remember. Memories of joy, faces of people, all gone with a name. Rennie snapped his fingers in front of her face, and Delta blinked up at him. He leaned in, face turning a little wrinkly. Was he frowning? I'm fine. I just had a thought to go down a bad path. She waved off his stare. He didn't look convinced, but he dropped the matter. That had been weird. She shook her head before opening up the circus menu. The upgrades weren't as weird as she had expected, but still, it had a few surprises for her. Circus of the night, 1,000,000 dreams, 1,000,000 regrets. Fully repair the circus structure, 3DP. Have the lights restored and running on ambient manner, 5DP. Install a gate to only open with a ticket, requires a ticket booth, 10DP. Create a box of general juggling and trick items in the tent, 10DP. Delta purchased the first upgrade as Rennie led Missy by the hand, the curious little eyes looking around the area of her home as she hadn't yet been in. Delta smiled at the way Rennie was patient with her, pointing and gasping at things that she had never seen before. The rough floor was neatly combed over and arranged to keep the ring's soil, which was lighter like sand, contained by a metal ring that was rapidly being freed by rust and filth. Audience stands creaked and groaned as their collapsed wooden state was undone and stood proud once more, ready for the audience that was to come. A thick fabric walls billowed a dust, and tears vanished like bad memories. The whole circus tent rippled as it rose higher and higher, like a sagging beast, finally inhaling after so many years of silence. The wooden pillars bulged and began to reshape themselves into statues of various people, holding the tent up with their hands. A woman with a hump and a wild grin that reminded Delta of Ruli, a man with so many muscles the wood looked ready to crack from just emulating his figure. A soft, shapely woman with a veil over her face, her calm eyes looking skyward. The final of the 4 pillar statues was a man breathing fire, the flames curling into the ceiling and merging to show them spreading. Rennie moved forward, dropping Missy's hand as he stood center point of the ring, spinning as he stared at the faces. I don't know them, but they came with the upgrade. Sis might have added something in. Do you know them? Delta tried to not intrude too much as Rennie looked downright dazed. The mime turned to Delta and slowly put a finger on his hand on his chest. He tapped his heart gently. Exact words weren't needed. Delta stood there and looked at them. She's the Beastmaster. She pointed to the woman with the whip. Rennie nodded quickly, and he jumped one arm, petting something. Strong and great with animals, Delta smiled. Missy pulled on Rennie's sleeve and pointed to the slim woman with the flowing cloth dress and veil. Rennie swayed at his odd but graceful steps, and Delta clapped his hands over understanding. She was a dancer. She looks really pretty. Delta said, and Missy nodded, and her eyes glowed with little pink in awe. Rennie went around and around, his gestures and emotions growing, as he told Delta and Missy more and more about the people. Rennie's hand motions and mimes became so excited that Delta soon was only able to pick out words or guess at them before Rennie moved on to his next sentence. Then he stopped as Wilhelm, the giant silver ape, stuck his head in, apparently feeling Rennie's excitement mood more than anything. Rennie softly pointed to the Beastmaster, and Wilhelm stared at it for a long moment before his face vanished. A soft, sad huff sounded before Wilhelm's loud steps left the circus once more. It's hard to wake up one day and have everything you know just gone. It feels like someone else's life after a while, Delta said when Rennie didn't move after that. Missy held Rennie's hand, and he tried to hold Delta's at the same time. The mime seemed to look at Delta for a long moment before he tilted his head to the side, curious. I wasn't always Delta, you know. I was... Delta trailed off The circus tent was fresh air, and the scent of sweet snacks and exotic spices soon followed. Delta repeated slowly. There was something there, just about to come loose like a baby tooth after days of pushing and wiggling. There was a feeling of heartburn and a sudden shock as Delta fell to her knees. At first, she was sure that she had tried to recall something forbidden, but when her human mind recoiled to pain and fear, her dungeon senses instantly narrowed down on the source of the problem. Just beyond the circus, the room yet to be untouched, which was going to be Rennie's key challenge, a crack had formed in the hard walls. She hissed, and Rennie was by her side, his hand forming around the handle of some invisible weapon. Delta could only watch as the walls buckled and the crack was widened by a thin black leg. She felt that the leg was hollowing into her own head. The hole was pushed open and the drooling face of a spider stared in. It slowly took a few steps into the dungeon. It didn't walk like it was nervous, but enjoying the sweet success of breaking in. Delta felt a little better. She had faced these guys before. Honestly, she had even forgotten that they really existed outside of being things that Hob and Gob had thrown in. The confidence lasted pretty well until her vision briefly looked past the first intruder. The tunnel beyond was black and moving shadows. This wasn't baby spiders or the three force from before. Delta stood and felt like her skin crawled as an army of monsters all slowly moved forward. Delta's dungeon was being invaded, and she didn't have Dio or Rudy to help this time. The darkness beyond the far end of the circus tent, where the performances and staff would enter, and the exit was soon filled with staring eyes of spiders. Some were the forest spiders that she had absorbed before, but were no new ones. Glowing green tiny ones when their thorax raised. The spider that seemed to be made out of web more than hair. Other shapes moved in the gaps, but Delta stood. "Run," she cried, not wanting Rennie and Missy to be overrun. The words were perhaps better suited for spiders, Delta thought after a moment as Missy's eyes turned black, and a few seconds later her gaze swept across the first few spiders that suddenly burst into action towards Rennie. Spiders, regardless of if they glowed green, were made of web or even if they had tails, burned equally, it seemed. Missy's eyes didn't look away, and her posture was one of defiance and anger. Another spider was shrieking and curling up as Rennie neatly made a finger and gun motions at them. The spiders, knocked out of their victory from coming into the dungeon, began to zerg rush them, and even with their amazing powers, Delta's friends would be overrun. Just as the first one would reach Rennie, Fang's bed, a giant silver fist appeared, smashing it into green and white paste. Wilhelm roared, his fury stretching across the jungle floor, daring these insects to come closer. Delta glared at the spiders. For some reason, their bodies, their mere existence, made her upset. The odd reason aside, these guys were slowing her project down, and if Kemi and her friends came back, Delta would not have these guys screwing up their adventures. Fine. Come on, I don't need an army to beat you back. I got Laser Princess Mushroom and a sassy mime, and you annoyed the giant ape. She yelled. Her voice carried much further than she meant to, and before she knew it, every leaf, every stone, and the very air itself trembled with her voice. The entire second floor went very still for a moment, and the spiders all froze as if sensing this. Delta narrowed her expression. Welcome to the jungle. Now get your crap and leave, she warned just once. The nearest spider was still for the longest moment before purpose filled its eyes and it stepped forward. It almost seemed to vibrate out of its intention. War. It was an instant. Delta saw the hand that guided these creatures. A mother, a caretaker, a creator, and she was sending these spiders in to die first to test Delta. This thing was using her kids to feel the water. That made Delta very angry. End of chapter. That, my friends, concludes this episode. I hope that you enjoyed. If you wish to support the author of the story, there will be a link below. If you wish to support this channel, there are multiple ways to do so, which will all also be linked below. But the easiest way would be to subscribe and share my videos as much as possible. And until next time, I hope you all have a good one. and I'll see you all in the next video. Cheers.